Well, is AI generated work slop making workers less productive? To talk about that, I'm joined by Kristina Rapuano. She's a research scientist at Better Up Labs. Kristina, thank you so much for doing this today.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been the theme of this podcast really for months now. AI, what's it doing to our world? What's it doing to work? And I'm interested in your perspective. Before we even get to that, tell me a little bit about your own background and how you ended up doing the work you're doing now.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm actually a cognitive neuroscientist by training. So I approach the work that I do really from the lens of the brain. But I became interested in definitely how we operate as humans, how the brain drives us and our motivated behaviors. But I started to gravitate more towards how do we think about human resilience and more of the positive psychology aspects of the brain and behavior, which led me to some of the work that I'm doing with BetterUp.
Which,
So I,
no,
yeah,
go ahead.
yeah. So I'm a research scientist on the BetterUp Labs team, where I mainly study how technology can enable personal development and organizational change.
And organizational change is all about generative AI right now, or not all about it, but it seems to be front and center when it comes to planning or figuring out what comes next. And the fear I hear over and over, not even fear, sometimes managers are planning for this, is it could do a lot of things humans can do. So, how many people will we actually need? How many job functions will be completely replaced? I thought it was interesting when I read some of your work that you don't think we're there yet. In fact, what is being created is something you called work slop.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, we absolutely do think that AI is making us more productive and will have a lot of realized returns. But I think that there is a big cautionary tale here that I would love to share more with you about.
Well, tell us about work slop, how you define it.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So work slop is AI generated work that looks, at least on the surface, as complete good work, but it might actually lack some real substance. So for example, this could be a document, a memo, a message that you received. It might be really polished and in the technical sense complete, but it's missing the quality that really only a human could provide. So it might be overly verbose, it could be convoluted, or maybe just missing the mark in terms of what it's intended to accomplish. So it might actually even be missing some context that you, as the reader, know that it should include or that you expected from your colleague, but it's not quite there.
Well, I don't know how you would really trust it. I mean, if you don't know a subject, let's say I don't know a whole lot about golf, and I ask it to give me a summary of how the season has gone and which are the best players right now, I can't really tell where the mistakes are, right?
Mhm.
So I have
Yeah.
to think there's a lot of that out there.
Yeah, for sure. So I do want to make a distinction between AI generated content and what we're defining as work slop. This is because, okay, so of course we're borrowing the name comes from this term of AI slop. So this is really AI slop can be defined as low quality, low effort content created by a generative AI. But what's unique about work slop is that the context of it being in the workplace. So it's not just AI slop or AI generated something that might be maybe a little annoying to see, but overall pretty benign. This is what we're calling slop that has more of a direct impact on how people are engaging at work and communicating with each other. So especially this is in a context where you expect alignment with your colleagues on shared goals and commitments. So you, in this case, you would probably have some awareness or some expectations around what kind of work you should be receiving. And so when something doesn't feel quite right, that's really what we're defining here.
Okay, but the person sending it has to know a lot about it if they're going to make it effective, right? How many, it's hard to answer this, but how prevalent is this for people just taking shortcuts?
Yeah, so we have surveyed over 1,000. We surveyed 1,000 US-based full-time employees, and more recently, we've surveyed another 1,500 that are a little bit more international, including Canada, in fact. And we've seen that pretty consistent numbers that about 40% say that they've encountered work slop, at least in the last month. And mhm.
No, go ahead. I was going to ask, is this like sort of just part of the process? We're waiting for the next iteration, or is it something that you think will last longer?
You mean the process
Of the
like
technology, right? Obviously, now it's not perfect. It's a little better than it was a year or two ago. Are we getting to a point where it'll be a lot better, or is this something you think it'll continue?
Yeah. So what's interesting is I actually don't think this is a failure of the technology itself. I think this is more of a system failure. I think it's more of a failure in how we're using it and adopting it, rather than the technology itself. I think that this is it's a case when people are. I mean, in a lot of cases, they told us that they're aware that what they're sharing with their colleague is low effort, is low quality. So when we surveyed these employees, we actually we asked them about their own AI use, and we kind of we led them into this framing of how often do you use AI, how often do you use it at work, how often do you share AI generated work with your colleagues, and then within that we asked how much of that do you think is actually unhelpful, low effort, or low quality, and actually like more than half of people are ready to admit that, yeah, sometimes I do that. So I think it's also that awareness as well.
Can you give us some examples of how this is actually creating more work in some sense?
Yes, absolutely. So this is one of the biggest pieces of this is really the cognitive burden and the offloading that this is causing by offloading work onto your colleagues. So let's imagine you receive something from a colleague that doesn't quite look like what you expected it to. And so now, first, you're having to read this thing that's probably pretty overly verbose. Maybe it's a document, or maybe it's a message. Maybe you have to read it a few times to even understand what this thing is. You're questioning it because it doesn't seem quite right, not what you expected. Maybe it's missing some crucial pieces of information. And now you have to evaluate what to do with it. Do you confront your colleague? Do you revise the work? Do you redo it entirely? Do you integrate this, or knowing that it's missing something, you have to think about that. And then just put a number on that. So our research shows that people spend an average of 2 hours dealing with a single instance of Workslop. And of course, there's a lot of variability there. But on the whole, we see that this is a big time suck.
If you're enjoying this conversation and want to bring insights like these to your next event, visit lindanazareth.com to book Linda Nazareth as your keynote speaker. Linda is an economist and futurist, and she is a dynamic and experienced speaker who has presented to audiences across a broad range of industries on the megatrends shaping the economy and the future of work. That's lindanazareth.com, or send an email to speaking@lindanazareth.com.
And you can see why companies wouldn't like this because wasted time costs money. And you've actually put some numbers to that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the compounding effect of this is pretty enormous. So we used self-reported salaries to estimate the cost of Workslop per employee. So this actually it comes out to be $186 per employee per month, which might not sound so egregious, but if you think about what this means for a 10,000 person organization, this scales to about $9 million lost per year. So there's the time cost, but as you mentioned before, there's also this pretty drastic interpersonal effect that this is having.
Yeah, like an
Where
emotional
people,
cost, right?
yeah, absolutely, yes. So there's a huge emotional cost where we've seen that people that receive this kind of work, more than half of them tell us that they've felt annoyed, they felt frustrated. People are telling us that they feel confused or even outright offended. Actually, a third of the people that we surveyed told us that after they received work like that, they would prefer not to work with that colleague again if they had the choice.
Well, that's something really to think about, right? Because you think you're giving yourself an edge, or organizations think they're giving everyone an edge, and it's having the opposite effect.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, just to emphasize this, we see a pretty drastic effect in how this is impacting people's relationships. I think that's the most insidious aspect that Workslop is having. So not only do people feel that emotional response themselves and how annoyed they feel, but they're also seeing their colleagues as less creative, less capable. They're seeing them as less reliable. They're saying that they trust their colleagues less. And that has like obviously some really severe repercussions for how people are interacting at work.
Now, some people are better at this than others. I know you use the term pilots. Tell us about that.
Yes. Okay. So we see this as a really crucial aspect to how we're adopting AI, and I think it's a big piece of how we can think about reducing the incidence or the prevalence of work slop. So we've been collaborating with Stanford Social Media Lab for over 2 years, maybe almost 3 years now, and we've been surveying how people think about AI, how their mental models are evolving, how they're using it, and we've repeatedly, again and again, have seen that these mindsets have differentiated a host of behaviors, how people are showing up at work, what they do with AI. And we call these the pilot and passenger mindsets. So pilots are those that are high in agency and optimism. So these are people that feel excited about the potential of AI. They feel in control of how they're using it. And we also see that pilots are about half as likely to generate work slop. So actually, at first, this could actually seem counterintuitive because pilots are also the ones that are using AI like far more than what we call passengers. So passengers are kind of the flip side of this. They are low agency, low optimism. They're very pessimistic about the future of AI at work, and they're less likely to use it. But we see that passengers, when they do use AI, they tell us that they primarily use it in ways that they're cutting corners or avoiding doing the work themselves. So it's actually no surprise that these are really the work slop culprits.
Interesting. So if you're a leader and you want to have a lot of pilots on board, not a lot of passengers, or at least you don't want to lose money, what is the guidance you would give them?
Okay, so yeah, I think this is a big it's a crucial piece for organizational commitment and guidelines. So one of the key aspects that we've seen in what is correlating with the prevalence of work slop is actually AI mandates. So it's not surprising. A lot of people have a lot of guidelines and specifically mandates around AI use at work. But it's not enough to just mandate outright to say AI has to be used, give some metrics for that, but rather how that's communicated, we're seeing is really the crucial piece of this. So when leadership is transparent about AI, how it's used, and establishes clear guidelines, it creates this foundation of norms that can really cascade throughout the organization. And we see that the likelihood of employees being a pilot increases by 21 times when that leadership communication is able to build that trust and that clarity, that purpose.
Yeah, it's interesting because I talk to all these people about how they're using it in their organizations. And what I find is the leaders aren't equipped, right? People aren't really trained to reskill people. Everyone's just learning as they go. When we get a year or two into this, are you optimistic that we'll all be using it better?
I think that it's going to take time, and I think it's going to take, again, going back to that particular set of mindsets, I think that is something that we can build up with time and with training, with AI literacy. We can improve the way that we're approaching these tools and gaining more agency in particular around how we use it. So I am optimistic. I think that this is really a signal of what can go wrong if something is just outright mandated, use this thing without the right tools or the right training. I think this is not necessarily a failure of the technology. As I said, I think it's something that will require time for the systems to catch up.
And it's a big debate. How much productivity are we going to gain by using AI? You think it'll be sizable gains?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's easy to be a pessimist when you're looking at the numbers like this in terms of how AI is having potential negative consequences on the workplace. But I do think that ultimately, with the right guidelines in place, I think that the net benefits are absolutely outweigh what we're seeing in these like early initial experimental phases.
Kristina, thanks so much for talking to me today.
Thank you.
Kristina Rapuano is a research scientist at BetterUp Lab.
Thanks for listening to Work in the Future. If today's episode sparked ideas for your organization, reach out. I would love to help you shape the future of work at your next event. To discuss your event and book me as a speaker or moderator, please visit lindanazareth.com or email speaking@lindanazareth.com. You can also visit me on Instagram at Linda Nazareth Keynote Speaker and send me a direct message there. If you did like this discussion about the future of work, please remember to subscribe to the podcast. Also, your reviews really help people to find us, so please make sure you take time to leave one wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks so much for listening. And as always, thank you to Stokely Audio for audio production.